Welcome to the Undergang Armchair. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the gang, welcome. Welcome back. We are so excited. We have a new season opening up here. It's not really officially a season per se, but we've done reruns for the past 3 weeks in order to regroup, to think about what we're doing, to come back stronger, and now we just couldn't be more excited to be here. All right, and we got the new intro music too. What do you guys think? Yeah, we dropped that rap music, not because we didn't like it, but because, just maybe wasn't the best intro for the show. The process of making this show is an organic one. We're learning by doing. We're trying things on to see if they fit. And I'm telling you guys, we're building something good here. We can feel it. We have a fantastic guest today, Darren Almond, who has a fantastic show at Bo Bjerregaard. But I'll get back to that in a second. But first, I just want to say hello to any new listeners. This is a show about art and about creativity where we meet people. And the focus that's developing as we're doing this is going towards, why do we do this? Why do we make art? Why are we creative? What does it mean to be a professional artist? These are the sort of questions we're out here asking. And, it's just a conversation. We get a hold of people, we corner them, and then we go for it. And Darren is one of those people that was instantly on board. He knew what we were talking about here. He's a super talented artist. He's a humble man, clearly. He remembers where he came from. He remembers the people that helped him along the way. And I think that's made him all the more powerful. He's a next level artist for sure. He has an amazing sight. He has an amazing ability to look into things and dig things out of ideas and of places and presenting them in his own language. He really has built up an artistic language for his practice. And he's clearly a traveler, a seeker, a thinker, a reader. He's out there. He's exploring the world and digging up treasures and showing them to us. And I'm telling you guys, the show is absolutely killer at Gallery Bo Bjerregaard. You got to go check it out if you're here in Copenhagen. And speaking of the gallery, I want to shout out Bolette and the rest of the staff at the gallery for being a big help. They have been a huge help to this program. We want to remember to shout out the people who helped too. So definitely Gallery Bo Bjerregaard and Bolette over there. So go see the artwork, go see the show, and then also go see Chart. The second annual Chart Art Fair in Copenhagen is next weekend. And I will be there wandering around with a microphone. This is your chance to say it to my face. And, I'm just going to try to talk to as many people as I can and hear what the hell's going on. What's up with the art fair? What are we doing? All right, what else we got here? Yeah, there's the Photo Collect Copenhagen. There is a photo fair going on same weekend, 28th through the 31st of August. And it's an international group of galleries which are presenting only photographic art. I'll also be over there checking it out, seeing what's going on, talking to people. There'll be links to all the important information on art fairs and opening hours and all that stuff on the show notes for this episode. All right, join us for a really interesting talk with Darren Almond.
Ballet thing, so we took time off for 3 months before the kids went to school.
There's really something about California.
That's great, I love it.
And I had to get out. I mean, I left in 2006. It was halfway through the second term of Bush.
Right.
I didn't have a good job. I didn't,
right.
And it was just kind of like, I gotta go.
Yeah.
But my fiance, she's Italian, and she's right. Of course like, we should go to California. That's where she wants to be. So
no, I like it. It gets dark really early, and it's fucking cold, and it's wet. It's perfect.
But it's social benefits, and the quality of living is so high.
Yeah.
And so for me, what I found out essentially is that it's a great place to get some work done.
In Los Angeles?
No, here.
Here, yeah. The thing about LA, and well, that's part of the world for me. I mean, the time difference that's because I'm European though, but, I'd get up and I could be done by work by 9:30 in the morning.
Right.
Everybody else has gone to sleep.
Right, and then
everyone's left the office. It's like, okay, great, yeah, but the day's mine.
Right, we'll drive around.
Just,
Yeah, I mean, the problems with California and kind of America in general really kind of kick in more when you live there, and kind of deal with. I mean, the fact that you're working, work life there is not respected as much as it is here. Vacations and sick leave and if you're going to have a kid, any of those sort of things. Yeah. And that's where it really shines in Europe.
Yeah.
So
the education thing here is very good.
Also, I'm an art school dropout because I decided I just was not worth $500,000 in debt.
It's expensive, huh?
It was, and so I just said, okay, if I was going to be a doctor or a lawyer, you can justify those costs. You've got something to pay it off with. But if you're going to be an artist, what are you going to do with all that money?
I have friends that went through Cal Arts and stuff that I'll actually see him next. I'm in LA in September. I do a show in LA. So I'll get to see him again. And he had the same thing, just like huge debt.
Right. And they're good schools. It's not bad.
Yeah, they're great schools. And it's just, it's a phenomenal amount of money.
So, I mean, that's the thing, basically if you're middle class in the US, you can probably live a pretty good life, comparable to here.
Yeah.
But if you're below that, it's a struggle.
It's difficult.
And my parents, they had kids in both places. Right. And they said it ended up costing about the same because, in Europe, school's paid for, healthcare is paid for, all those sort of things. But you pay more in taxes.
Sure.
Whereas in the States, they paid for those things with the money they earned, but not everybody had the right to them.
Yeah, sure.
That was kind of the constant problem I have.
Different demographics.
Yeah. So I guess ideally it would be a resident or be a citizen of a European country and then live 6 months a year.
Yeah, my dream is that I'll retire, inverted commas, to California.
Retire.
But how the fuck do you retire?
Exactly.
I don't think you do. You can't retire. It's impossible. How the fuck do you stop working?
Well, I mean, that kind of brings me straight into the point of this whole show, which is like, why do we do what we do? And is it a job or is it a lifestyle or is it a necessity?
You get up and you work, you get up and you think, you get up and you move it with every footstep. Every time you put your foot down, you're thinking about how much the environment has changed with every footstep. Every walk is a thought.
Do you think everybody's like that?
If you're being persecuted, it's harder to think. I've been fortunate enough to escape the kind of working persecution of the landscape of the people that raise me.
Are you talking about being lower middle class and having to work constantly to make money?
Being working class, coming from a family of miners,
right?
And and grandparents from the war, grandparents miners, father labourer, and didn't of limited education,
right?
But I was kind of fortunate to have met the writings of George Orwell when I was a kid. And George Orwell, a social commentary writer, wrote A Road to Wigan Pier, which is an account of the mining landscape in the northwest of England in the 30s, and A Road to Wigan Pier. And Wigan is my town, and I thought as a kid, if there's a road to Wigan, then there must be a road from Wigan.
So you kind of immediately knew.
So there was my kind of way out.
Right. Was Wigan one of those places that you very early realized, I got to get out of here, or was there any benefit to it? I mean,
the only time that family members would leave the country at that time was if they were sent away to war. So the only kind of exotic imagery you would come across in the family album would be like your great grandfather on horseback about to go to battle, or it would be my granddad in the desert in a tank or something like this. That was the only time you would leave the country. There was all my family, and my mother lives in the house next door to the one that she was born in. It's people didn't move. It's only through, her first visit to London, the capital city of her own country, was only made when she was in her late 40s, when she was coming to visit me,
It's wild how much that has changed in a single generation. Really.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
My great-grandfather was killed in World War I, and my great-grandmother remarried with a Norwegian man who moved to America in the time where you could give somebody $5 and buy, a huge plot of land, build a fence, and just go. And these are the same thing. He emigrated and then never went anywhere. That ranch that was it. And the children were raised there, and the family's still there in a lot of ways. My mom was one of the people who, like you, said, I am out of here.
Right, okay.
And bailed.
Huh. There's a Norwegian, is it in the west coast of California?
Oh.
Along from Santa Barbara?
It's Danish.
Is
that
it?
Town, which is like some sort of weird Disneyland Danish culture. Have you seen it?
Yeah, of course.
Solvang.
Yeah, Solvang, that's it, Solvang. The land of the blue oak trees or something like this.
That place is wild.
Exactly the same trees that they had over here. Went all that way and shit.
Yeah, no, there's those weird kind of like socio-cultural things about the U.S. but it's not Danish at all in a weird way. You go there and these are Americans, and then I saw a very interesting piece about that area in which they talked to all the people who worked in the kitchens and the restaurants there who are of Hispanic origin.
Right.
Just like every other restaurant in California. And here they are in this town, which is ostensibly 100% Danish.
Right.
And they come from the Yucatan, and they're just kind of like, I guess this is where I work now, There's that really weird clash.
Yeah.
But back to the thing, it's just interesting that there are these jumps. So how did you get out? You just decided, I got to get out of here. I got to go see something else.
I got out through, I was my grandfather gave me a portrait of him, that was made during the war, before he died I was very close to my grandfather. He lived next door, and he gave me this drawing, which is a portrait of him that was done in pencil by a German soldier in the war that he'd caught, and it was the end of the war, and he had to march these Germans he was told to take them into Berlin, and on that march, he traded a packet of cigarettes for this portrait to be drawn, and he handed me that drawing before he died. He died quite young of cancer. I was kind of 11 years old at the time, so I was quite distraught. It was my, it's quite an age to approach the idea of death, I suppose. That kind of infinity.
Right. So right next door.
And then I had this drawing, and that's the first piece of art that I'd kind of come into contact with, and it had a huge emotional resonance, and I had it on the wall next to my kind of bed, and I've lived with it ever since. It's in my studio now, where I sit in London. I've always kind of carried it with me. So as a kid, I was the go-to boy if you needed something drawing.
So you just started
as a young age. I was always the drawer of the class, the set maker, the whatever, and.
Was that a positive position? Or
it was great. Position? It was fantastic, because I was quite little, so it kind of it stopped me being bullied a little bit.
Right.
And then one of my teachers mentioned this idea of college and university, and these were words that had never been uttered in the family. It's like, really? You can go? Oh, after school you go? Really? Wow.
You don't go straight into the mines?
Really? Oh God! But my parents and I finished school when they were like 14 and just worked ever since.
Yeah.
So you can. There was another path, and then she said, "And if you're kind of really crazy, you go to art school."
Right. You're like, "There's a school where you draw all day long."
I'm going. So.
And was that from a pretty early age?
That was from a very early age.
Yeah.
I think I kind of nailed that. I got myself some direction from. I was fortunate to have it really early, like 8, 9. I kind of knew what my strength was, and then and then you kind of, as you're being taught all the other subjects as you're at school, you kind of realise that art kind of brings everything everything falls into the basket that is art. So,
right. If you're looking for it, you can see it everywhere.
Yeah.
Was it a big shock when you went eventually to art school?
Was it a big shock? I was surprised at how unimpassioned a majority of the students were.
It's just like any other school after a while, it turns out.
Yeah. I was a little alarmed at how uninvolved.
Immediately?
Kind of.
Mm.
I mean, but it was there was a real kind of lust and desire for me to be there.
Right. I mean, that must reflect in you, in your engagement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I went to one of the only art schools that solely was involved in the teaching and practice of making art. Winchester, at the time it was Winchester and Norwich. What I mean is that they're not affiliated to any other universities. Mm. So you wouldn't have a discourse with other sciences or other medias, or it was just basically
straight studio practice,
art-related school. And it was on the outskirts of London. I was still a little bit scared of going to the big city because of
the one you saw on television,
because of my heritage, where nobody had been there. So it kind of functioned quite well. It was in a kind of a sleepy, pretty town called Winchester.
Was it more of a technical education, or were they very classical? Or
I applied for. It was divided into painting and sculpture, and I applied to do kind of both. And there was a little bit of a argument between the staff as to which department I should go into, but I opted for sculpture basically because it was on the ground floor, so you could practically drag whatever you wanted into the studio and then drag it out and throw it in a skip.
Which you then proceeded to do.
Yeah, exactly. And my tutor he kind of came through the teachings of Caro. So John Gibbons is his name. He came through this kind of abstract style expressionist school of sculpture through Anthony Caro. But he'd been at St Martin's, so it was quite lively, and it was a good time. Had a great library.
Lively is key.
Yeah.
Because, art school can, like you said, there's a lot of unengaged people, strangely enough. Yeah. Which I always found especially interesting in America when you're like, how much this costs, right?
Sure.
You should really maybe.
Yeah.
But that's also the strange thing about going to university at an age in which you're also figuring out what it means to be an adult, quote unquote, what it means to be a sentient being in our society.
Yeah, you're learning how to wash your socks and shit like that.
Right, and I spent a lot of time boozing instead of getting work done, and that's part of growing as well.
Sure.
But did you ever consciously say, okay, I'm going to make a go at being an artist? And I mean in terms of at a certain point money enters the picture. It has, people are artists, they draw at night after their jobs or...
it was destined to fail. That's, it's kind of a practice that was bound to fail. That's the thing.
What was?
Art. I was very... expectant. I mean, I just thought that I would leave art school and then just have to get a job.
Right.
And that would be it.
The minds of you.
But I thought that you would know, people would know if you were an artist,
Right. You still had that in you. It was some sort
of... It was obviously apparent.
Right.
I thought there's no, you would know because people wouldn't. It's just, I never had that kind of overwhelming self-belief and confidence to introduce myself as an artist.
Well, that's
I was kind of embarrassed by that kind of idea.
Well, that's kind of the question I keep coming back to is why do you choose to do this? Because it's one of those things people tell you your whole life. Mm-hmm. You basically can't do this. It's not a job. You won't. Mm-hmm. Nobody makes a living except for a very selected few. Mm-hmm. It's like being a rock star. It's, that sounds great, but what are you really going to do?
Right.
You know, and at some point there must be some sort of like forward momentum or self-chosen moment which goes into taking that step and saying, I am going to do this.
I got a job, you know, as soon as I graduated, then the next day I was kind of back up north, back in Wigan, back where I belonged, and got a job.
With your people.
Back with my people. Got a job, and then in the place that I worked, I kind of got a studio at the back, so I would work through the nights building my sculpture, and I was attempting to kind of get into another college in London.
For like an MFA or something?
Yeah, exactly. And then I came down and visited my tutor who lived in London and showed him the work that I was making, and he kind of laid it out flat and said, well, why do you want to go and do an MFA? Why do you want to go back to college? Because you're doing it.
Right. You are doing what you
doing
want.
it. You are surviving and you are making art. So you're already doing it.
Right.
There's nothing, you know, what's your problem?
Right.
So then I moved to London, and I was wandering down Oxford Street and was very pleased with myself. I kind of moved down on Christmas Eve to kind of prove a point to, I don't know, my parents or me. I don't know, no idea. I mean, that was a little bit, I'm going, it's Christmas Eve. A little dramatic, but it's, you know, it's good for the biography. Huh? So I came down and slept in my mate's bath and stuff. You know, I didn't have that much money at all, and then I had to find a job. I was wandering down Oxford Street, and there was a sandwich chain had just opened called Pret a Manger.
Oh, that place is good.
Yeah, well, the first one had just opened, and I walked in and said, anyway, they interviewed me, and they said they're going to open another store, and you make a great manager, because I kind of cooked my way through college as well, part-time in the evenings. So I was pleased with myself. I got myself a job, and then I wandered down Oxford Street, and I looked over the left-hand side, and on Derring Street there was Anthony Doffey Gallery, and I walked into the Doffey Gallery. And back then, in the very early 90s, you know, it was pretty much the only gallery in London, contemporary art.
Right.
There was the Lisson Gallery, Doffey, Victoria Miro, but it was pretty much just Doffey. And I walked in, there was a Bill Viola show on, and just as I was leaving, as the door opened, I opened the door to leave, and I turned around to the girl in reception and said, have you got any jobs for a technician? And she said, oh, the head technician's just quit this morning and he's emigrating tomorrow to Australia, because that's the only way you can leave this place. Come in tomorrow and have an interview. So I came in the following day, went and bought myself a second-hand suit from Oxfam, you know, looked ridiculous, went in and had an interview, and I persuaded them that because of my pizza making abilities in Winchester, I was the man that you need to put in charge of your Warhols.
That's it. It's similar to running a projector.
Yeah. And so they gave me the job, and
fortuitous.
And the next week, you know, I was in the stock room surrounded by, you know, 300 Boyce drawings and Baslitz paintings, Naumann sculptures, and having to deal with the deinstallation of the one of the shows, and that happened to be a sculptor, Reinhard Mucker from Dusseldorf. And one of the great things about Wigan was that the art school where I did my foundation course, the art school had this amazing library and an amazing subscription to all the art journals and magazines. And so that's how I was able to fuel my kind of interest. And
so your eyes were already open, you could say.
I'd seen a lot of stuff through the magazines, but, you know, and he had stood out. He'd been somebody that I'd kind of focused on. You know, there was also like a Taschen contemporary art book that was issued, and, you know, Wigan doesn't have a bookshop. You know, this is what
it's the only way to find it.
And this book was bought in like a neighbouring town by my grandma. You know, Taschen, you know, they have amazing distribution, contemporary art book, and it covered the whole kind of Cologne scene. So I'd go through these pages, and Mucker was the guy that stood out. And then
there you were.
There I was, and because Reinhard's very particular and fastidious about how his works moved and handled, he was over for deinstallation. So I met him, and he was great. He was a regular guy. We did the work together. We had a beer. We spoke about football. He had a fascination with trains. And then just having that contact with somebody, I was like, huh.
Isn't that nice?
It's like, you're not this thing on a pedestal. You're
just a guy.
You're a guy.
Yeah.
And that was a huge, and then I think, in the 10 months I was there, I came into contact with a lot of work by a lot of great artists, because it was an amazing gallery. But you could also, I also came across some of the weaker sides of the artist practice, and that was also very humbling. It's like, oh fuck, and then it's nice to know that there's an amplitude of work that people make. There's a thinking process of things that aren't so successful, things that are very successful. And that's just, and that's great.
Right, which is part of bringing it down to a regular level.
Allowing you to get on the same train.
Right. So, I mean, at this whole time, you were also still making your works?
At that point, no, because my time was fully occupied. And then I left the gallery, and that's when I got my first studio in London. And then from there, everything kind of happened rather quickly. Though I installed a sculpture. I made an oversized ceiling fan and illegally installed it on the underside of a freeway and powered it from my studio, which is about 200 meters away. And when I would go there at night and work in my studio, I'd flick a switch in the corner of the studio, and a couple of 100 meters away, this ceiling fan would start to spin underneath this elevated freeway, and it would turn the hulk of this piece of concrete into this kind of sky boat thing floating through the night sky. And then I organised with my girlfriend at the time. Well, she put together this group show, which I helped, and I helped her, and she invited Reinhard Mucker to come over. So we went to visit Reinhard. And I showed him my work. He then took me to Wuppertal and showed me the Schwebebahn train system, and so I made a 8mm film about that, which was the first kind of time I'd shot anything in terms of moving image. I came back, put it into the projector, then watched it and put it back in the projector, and because of my kind of naivety, I put it in backwards and upside down because I hadn't rewound the film, but then the piece worked. Something happened.
It started to vibrate.
When it was, because the Schwebebahn is a suspended monorail system. So
is that the one that hangs from the top? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So if you flip it round, then it becomes a normal train trundling along an upside down world. So this was the beginning of a trilogy of train films that I started. That subsequently ended up in the Met, and back in the studio, I was still coming to terms with this idea of being an artist.
Now someone was paying attention to.
Because I now had a studio, so therefore by implication it meant that you are an artist. So I somehow had to come to terms with the fact that I was an artist, but I still was just literally going in there and staring at a blank wall.
Were you feeling ashamed or guilty, or like it wasn't right?
I didn't know quite. The structure of the art school had kind of gone, and you're kind of out there by yourself then. So and the practice had changed. My interest had changed. You readdress. In your foundation year, you work through a lot of stuff very quickly in the space of 12 months, and then that circle of work seems to repeat itself through your practice, but it expands, and the diameter, the circumference gets larger over time, and then it comes round slower and slower, but you still kind of go on a similar kind of circular path.
Right.
Where was I? Got back to the studio, staring at a white wall, and I was going over to this space over on the east side of town. I was west side of town, and one of the disused shops that we were going to use as gallery spaces for this show. London was buzzing because the whole kind of YBA thing was kicking off, and in one of the spaces I'd found this security camera, a CCTV camera. There weren't that many floating about then.
Right, this was back in the
so it was like, oh fuck me, there's my friend George Orwell again. There's 1984. There's something going on here. He's in the space that okay. So I took the camera back to the studio, started fucking around with it, breaking it, pulling it apart, and decided that what I should do is probably try and do a live link from my studio to the exhibition space.
Are we in the mid-90s here?
This is mid-90s. This is early 90s. So this is when people were still running around answering pages.
Right.
And only a few people had a cell phone. So the internet wasn't around at this point.
Right.
So this whole kind of idea of live feed and the kind of spectacle of that and what that incorporates was still more of a spectacle, shall I say. So I approached the BBC, the then BBC, and asked them if they could set up a live link from my studio to the other side of town. So they came round, and because Thatcher had partly had made the BBC franchise itself out to be more business savvy. They were more privatized. They were allowed to rent their equipment.
And you could call them? You could just call the BBC?
I just called them up, and they came over. And so I sat in my little cold studio, kind of like, I didn't know what was going to turn up. And then this guy turned up with a pair of binoculars and a compass. And I was like, huh? I was expecting like a big truck and stuff. He said, no, I'm just going to look at let me get to the roof here. So he went up onto the roof of the building. And from the roof of the building, he could see Television Centre, which was kind of a mile away in Shepherd's Bush. He said, I've got a line of sight there. Okay, that's good. So what I'll do, I'll send a microwave beam from here to that building in a straight line. Then underground cables can go about 30 miles. We have an antenna in the south of London. So the signal will go 30 miles underground, up the antenna. They'll then send a signal to some guys on top of a high-rise in Brixton on the south side of the river. They'll catch the signal. Then they'll turn around and send a signal to a high-rise behind where you want to go in the northeast of London. They'll catch the signal, and then we'll probably get 400 metres of cable and run it and plug it directly into your projector. We'll have a live link.
Shit.
So okay.
That sounds great.
That sounds perfect. Thank you very much.
It makes me think so much about what a transitional time that was, too. Because if you think about the infrastructure involved with that, now you could do it with one friend with a little bit of internet savvy. That's all there would need to be.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
That was, at the time when signals traveled through air.
And that was high bandwidth as well. This is microwave, so it was broadcast quality. So it needed, the piece needed, all I did was to point the camera in the corner of the studio where I sat, where my drawing desk was and where a window was, and there's a back wall. And on the wall I put one of these mechanical clocks.
The flip ones?
The flip clocks. Yeah. So I put the microphone inside the flip clock. And then the live feed was sent, and it was projected life size. So he walked in, it was like it worked like a camera obscura in part, a kind of digital one. But every minute there was this almighty crash because I'd amplified the sound signal, and that's what made the event live, and it went live. But people came to the opening and were kind of curious as they thought it was a video projection. But there's all these kind of oscilloscopes in the corner.
Right.
And so one of my friends, an artist, Jake Chapman, he was one of the early guys. He was quite successful early on. So he had a mobile phone. So I said, call the studio. So he called the studio, and then there was this huge feedback loop generated. Right. And then everybody froze in the space and was like, fuck, it's live. It's like, That was an interesting kind of moment.
Right. Well, you've been developing kind of an interest in time. Mm-hmm. And that must have been, was that kind of near the beginning of of that interest?
After that event, I was asked by the ICA to enter this competition, which I did and won. So that meant that I could do a show. I was able to do a show there. So I set up another link with a prison.
Just for the listeners, what's the ICA?
Institute of Contemporary Art.
In London.
In London, yeah. And so I set up this live feed from a work in prison. I got them to. I spoke to the Home Office, and because we knew that the new Labour government was going to come in and the Conservatives were going to be out after all that time. The prison service said, well, we can do this, but let's do it after May, after the election, because we think we'll have different authority then. So you can come and do it then. So we were able to set that link up. But then I would go back to the studio and I'd still have this bloody blank wall to be looking at.
Those goddamn walls.
So, because, I physically hadn't made anything.
Right.
I just had this white wall, so I sat in front of the wall for a day and photographed it every minute for 1,440 minutes, which had these two extraordinary kind of moments, time frames, at dawn and dusk, because this was midwinter. I deliberately shot on the shortest day of the year. And then there was this sort of kind of, I was a little naive. I kind of sat there thinking I could listen to music and maybe read a book and stuff, and I hadn't really worked out. I didn't really know how long a minute was. And it's not that long, really.
It's either really long or really short.
Yeah, or, you're so exhausted that you live the same minute again and again and again.
Right.
And when the contact sheets came back, because there was a clock in the corner, there was a clock in the shot telling me the time. The idea was the clock goes over, I take a shot. The clock goes over, I take a shot. And I would stay there for 24 hours. But 1 minute, I think I shot it 8 times.
You start to time becomes so
memory. You're just so exhausted,
untethered to everything.
You're just so exhausted that you can't. Did I take that? Oh, I better take it again. And if you do the math, 8 times in 1 minute. That's like 8 seconds. It's like, okay, did I do that? No, I better do it again.
Oh man,
did I do that?
Standing in the dark room, you're like, did I just wait?
Yeah.
Was that the beginning of your interest in photography then?
Yes.
Is photography a tool for you, or is that more of a material, or what position does photography fill?
That's how I stumbled into photography.
Right, because that's my step into your work is the full moon works.
Right.
As a photographer myself, I find them obviously to be stunning and interesting and engaging. Photogravures, I especially like photogravures. I know Crown Point Press in San Francisco. That has been my kind of material side in.
Right.
So, of course, it's of special interest to me to hear what that material means to you.
Right. Well, it was that kind of experiment, and plus put that with the idea of trying to document. I was trying to document this ceiling fan on the underside of the Westway that was lit up. So I was engaged in speaking to photographers about the math of all things photographic.
How to make this work.
Of all things photographic. How the hell does this work? So the math of the whole thing was in my head. And I'd been living in this, biographically, I've been living in the city for some time now, and I'm a country boy. I was kind of used to walking across fields at night led by the light of the moon, and I'd realised that I'd not really seen the moon since I've been in the city, because it had been hidden, it had been disguised by all the sodium light. And I found myself in the south of France, and up popped the moon. I was at the foot of Mont Saint Victoire, and the moon kind of came up, was full, and the math and the camera were there together. And so I thought, maybe an exposure of 15 minutes would do it. And it did. And I got this image back. One image, full colour, which was a bit of a surprise. I mean, so naive, it's ridiculous. But I think that, you have to, there's a theme in the show of this kind of zero. The zero is becoming quite important to me now at the moment. It's this idea of, there's a sculpture on the wall called The Either Side of Nothing, and you have to, it's this idea, it's kind of almost like it's a kind of Zen idea where you have to know nothing in order to understand anything.
Is that the plus minus?
Yeah. And so sometimes at the time I felt I didn't really know anything about photography, but that was, you can shift, you can forge your own little kind of path into the medium that way. So then this image just kind of sat in my studio for some time, and a year or more, and which I just kept staring at this image and was compelled to look at it, and couldn't work out why I was drawn to this image, to the light in the image. And
it wasn't just aesthetic reasons.
It wasn't. No, there was something going on that I couldn't nail, and then the more you kind of analyze it, you start to work it out. The shadows are. Because of the duration, your light source is moving. So you have a constantly moving light source through the exposure. So that erases all shadows.
Right.
So the shadows go. So you have this kind of apparent bright light, but there are no shadows. It's like, whoa, hang on a minute. So there's part of your, this is the landscape this is our dreamscape. What landscape is this?
Right.
Where is this?
Well, unlike other photography, it's also an image you can't see in your real life. When you stand there and take that picture, it doesn't look like the final result.
No. You're exposing more.
Right.
You're going beyond the realms of your internal shutter speed and workings of your own eye. Yeah. But there was kind of a little bit more to it as well. There's always a little bit more to it. There's you're giving. Photography is controlled by time as well as light. It's the combination of the two. That's the math side of it. And you're giving. I shoot on film, so it's an organic process initially. And what you're taking something that's been designed to live for 1/60th of a second. You're giving it a lifespan that is infinite. Exponentially enormous. You're taking it up to 15 minutes, half an hour, 2 hours, weather dependent. It's a live event. You've got to sit there and watch the weather. You've got to be engaged with what happens in the landscape at that moment, throughout its whole duration, in order to get the exposure. And therefore you're given the landscape time to express itself,
right?
Rather than this idea of a glance. There is. You can't look back at a glance.
Right. There is no decisive moment.
No, not at all. No, and you're also allowing other currents that take place in the landscape to present themselves. So you can level the ocean, but you will reveal the current,
right?
Which is something which you don't see,
right? I wanted to ask Bill about travel and location too, because you seem to specifically work on location. You go places to make works. Again, maybe you're trying to get away from that white wall in the studio. But like you clearly location and travel is important. You were part of the Arctic show. Is that exploration or is that actual realization of ideas or?
I get led there by writings from other people. So I was invited as a direct result of starting the Full Moon project. I did a show at Take Britain with Turner, and because I'd followed in his footsteps in the early stages of the Full Moon series through the Alps. That was seen by this charity that was set up to clear the beaches of Antarctica. So I was invited to go down and be, in inverted commas, the artist on board at the end of the season. And the boat was it was a small sailboat that when it was the end of the Antarctic summer, the winter was coming in, the ice was forming, and we sailed around for a month or so down in Antarctica. And this was had a huge impact upon me. Because Antarctica, as you know, is a landmass. It's a large landmass. It's twice the size of Australia. But down in Antarctica, if you're at sea level, you're also above the clouds. Because there's no tree line. So if you look vertically at the globe, our existence is predominantly within the tree line.
Right.
And in Antarctica, it's non-existent. So you're in a landscape that we're not designed to be in. So it erases our existence. So it clears your mind. The first night I was there, I remember it was the first night on board the boat, and I slept, and then I had this dream, and everybody I'd ever met came into the dream. But literally everybody. Kids from my primary school, everybody. It was exhausting.
Some sort of weird reset button.
But it was a complete reboot. And then kind of slowly you kind of crawl back into the civilized, developed world. You know, you come back and you sail back across the Drake's Passage. I've never sailed before, and the next thing I'm chained to a boat crossing the roughest ocean on the planet. Huge swells, albatrosses behind us, waves 90 feet tall, just like what the fuck? Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't drink. It was kind of torturous. But then your visual palette has changed as well. Then you come back and you start to see green, and then you see a horse with 4 legs and stuff.
Right.
But then you get given pathways to follow, and this is a little bit confusing.
Right. I guess there are no pathways in there.
But no, you're free to go wherever you need. Anyway, so I then suppose that. Because I'd been to Antarctica, it made sense that I went to the Arctic, and I had my kind of and I wanted to go and have my kind of Caspar David Friedrich moment up in the Arctic and look for ice. And I was going to I wanted to go in via Russia, because I was rereading kind of histories of the 20th century, Russian 20th century, and in particular I focused on Joseph Brodsky. And he, the poet in exile that lived in America, but he was sent to a gulag in, his crime was his writing, and he was sent to Archangel. So I was hoping to go via Archangel to Murmansk, and there I would find my ice, and I could continue my Full Moon series in following the kind of romantic tradition. But when I got to Murmansk, the submarines, the nuclear submarines were stationed there, and a war had broke out in the Gulf somewhere, and I turned up in Murmansk as this American with all this camera equipment.
You were just American?
Well, you spoke English, you're American. Right. That's, you had camera equipment, you're American. And so they wouldn't let me go anywhere. They were literally like, no, won't take you there, can't take you there. And I'm like, they wouldn't let me leave the city, the boundary of the city. So I turned around and went back to St. Petersburg, and there I met with this guy who had this museum that dealt with the Arctic and Antarctic, and he said, if you're looking for ice, then go to Dudinka. And Dudinka is in the Taimyr Peninsula, which is central northern Siberia. So way up in the Arctic. And Dudinka is an old medieval port on the Yensi, which flows north from Novosibirsk. It flows up and into the Kara Sea, which is high up in the Arctic. And that's the route that the nickel comes from Norilsk. So
that's right there, those huge nickel mines.
The largest
in
the world is the nickel mine that controls the price of nickel globally.
Right.
But they also, which is why this lesson 0 is shot. So by accident, I ended up in Dudinka, and that's where on the ice there is where I shot the video Arctic Pull, which is what was just screened at Louisiana in the Arctic show. And as I was leaving Dudinka, I spotted this broken railway bridge, and the timbers that made the bridge were incongruous to the landscape in terms of scale, because all the trees were really fine and spindly, and most of them looked dead, and I had no idea. They looked burnt. They looked like they'd been a huge forest fire, is what I thought. But So that kind of looked weird because there was snow on the ground. And there's snow on the ground for 10 months of the year. So how did they have
Not much fire opportunity.
How much did they have? What the hell caused the fire? And I literally, naive questions again to the taxi driver. And he said, "Oh, well, that's a kind of silent monument, the broken railway bridge, because that's the first railway that was constructed between Dudinka and Norilsk Nickel." I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah." So we're now talking about the most northern railway in the world. So I'd happened upon this railway by accident.
Fortuitous again.
And the bridge had been constructed with the first railway. So basically, it was a gulag. Yeah? A German geologist was under the regime of Stalin, was sent up into Siberia to go and look, no other option, to go and look for ores and metals. And he came across Schmidt Mountain. Well, he came across a mountain, they named it after him. And the mountain contains all the mineral, or everything that's available, everything that you see on the periodic table is available within this mountain. And they've been mining it ever since. It's been churning out vast quantities of nickel since the 50s. The problem is that the nickel is heavily laced with a lot of sulfur, so they burn more sulfur into the atmosphere than, well, in that city they burn more into the atmosphere than in North America, including Canada.
All of it combined?
All of it combined.
Holy cow, that is a lot of sulfur.
And so that's why the forests and trees are...
Right, that changes the landscape entirely.
Well, the trees that you see in the photographs, they look like they're made of carbon, they look carbonized, or they look like they've been burned, but the trees have suffocated and then the wind has beat them. So that's why, a bit like a climber's fingers, when you get frostbite, they go black. That's what's happened to the trees. So that was the beginning of my relationship with Norilsk. So Norilsk then became the kind of studio of my mind somehow. It became a fixation for me.
And this is the show you have now.
This is work. I'm still making work from trips to and from Norilsk.
Right.
So the film installation you see is the second part of a trilogy of films. The first was called Anthropocene, The Prelude. Then we have this film, Less Than Zero, and I've got to shoot the final film.
The numbers. What are the numbers as part of the show?
You get to the numbers through language somehow. As I was saying, Brodsky kind of guided me across the Arctic. He kind of guided me through the landscape of all things Russian. And there's in the series of lithographs here, you'll see a line, or two lines that are highlighted. Only sound needs echo and dreads its lack. A glance is accustomed to no glance back. So that's referential in terms of photography, but it's also this idea that sound needing an echo, and if there is an echo, then there's another presence with you. And it totally described the landscape for me. It really nailed that landscape, this idea that when you talk, sound just falls to the ground. Unless you're with somebody, then you have an echo, and then you're no longer alone. Then the words, then this, it all starts to come through. The paintings kind of come through the kind of failings of the lexicon somehow, because I play with text and words in terms of the rail plates, the kind of bronze plaques that you see that are made for me by the people that make them for the British Rail. So the railway system in England, locomotives and engines are given a name. And there's a Nabokov quote where we think in the shadows of words. So we don't think in words, we think in the shadows of words. And this combined with there's a Primo Levi short story called The Tranquil Star.
I've read that one.
And he talks about the failings of language.
Right.
And also, and for me, I'm kind of in agreement in that language does become a little bit lazy. As soon as things tend towards the abstract, then we lose it within our lexicon. It
gets real blurry.
We can we can become lazy and everything become millions and billions and trillions. But if you think exponentially of what's happening in terms of scale, the language doesn't suit.
Right.
So anything that enters the abstract is quickly transferred into numerics. So the numbers of these kind of displaced numbers, the broken numbers, the digitized numbers, they've been severed. They're dealing with this, they're both abstract and figurative. They operate as a kind of sub-coordinates of a practice, of a space, of a place in time, of a space. They come from, they have a grid, they have a structure. So therefore you're dealing with geography in part.
Right.
So you're dealing with, and it's a global language, of course, but it's also a failed economy. The economy as it stands isn't working.
Right.
So it's a failed system that we're still adhered to.
Right. So it's so multi-layered, in fact, that you can take it. I mean, it reminds me of you talking earlier about the rotations of ideas. This work, these numbers can be the center of a certain set of rotations outside of that. Yeah. And they can go in many directions. You talk about economy, you talk about coordinates, you talk about fallacies of language, etc.
Exactly. And and they, in the yellow painting, in the sulfuric yellow painting, before you meet the landscape, there's the whole zero. So you have this kind of idea of numbers on either side of nothing.
Right.
And that's the only way that you can measure and gain any understanding of where you are, is to situate yourself.
Right. Well, I think it looks great. So you're supposed to walk in a specific direction, right? No?
Yeah, it's I'm really I'm not a dictator.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, you're obviously telling a story too. But it's an open-ended story.
There's a loop of thought.
Right.
There are gateways in and out. It's there are mantras that reference themselves in and through the piece. There's a lot of cross-referencing going on.
Right, and in and out of your own practice and experience too.
Sure, absolutely.
Now we've reached this point. Here you are now a working artist. You're living the life. You're doing what people told you couldn't do. Why do you do it now? I don't think
people didn't tell me I couldn't do it.
Society didn't? I mean, for me,
I thought I couldn't do it.
Okay, so you told yourself even you couldn't do it in a way.
Yeah, I presumed I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I mean. Is it's just that weird knowledge everybody has that being an artist is like being a rock star, being the president, or being a prime minister. Somebody else gets to do that, not me. Yeah. But now you are doing it. Why do you do it now? I mean, you spoke earlier about retirement in a very facetious way. Yeah,
but I can't. You can't. I mean, you do it because it's you. That's what. This is how I engage with the world.
Right.
This is my way of learning about my situation, coming to terms with where I am, trying to pass this on to my children. This is my understanding. This is knowledge. This is a walk. This is knowledge. This is thinking. This is thought.
This is the journey.
This is it. This is the small glimmer of light between an infinite darkness. I'm here for this short, tiny, tiny fraction of time.
I can't really think of a better reason to do it then.
So,
is art important? I don't just mean to you, but
of course, it's the only thing. Huh? It's the most important energy. It's in everybody. Even if you're told it's not, it is.
That's wild. I want to thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
I can't really think of a better way to end it than that.
Okay. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. All the best.
Yes. It's crazy the difference between people who are open-hearted in conversations and just really want to be present and to meet people and the people who aren't. It's one of the really interesting things about doing this show is the extreme difference between the way people talk to you. And I'm not just talking about the actual conversation, the recorded conversation, but all the steps along the way too, about booking, accessibility, how do you get a hold of people, that whole thing really, it varies wildly the way that people are available or present or, and I understand people have a lot of people trying to get a hold of them. If you are an artist like Darren or Jonathan Mace or, some of the other, internationally known artists, there's probably a lot of people trying to holler at you. But the way they deal with it really varies a lot. And I find it's always really a relief and it's inspiring. As a person who's trying to work towards being a professional artist, it's really inspiring to meet these people. That's what I'm saying in short here. And, it's also really inspiring to see next level art. It really is. Things are going great with my work right now. I'm getting some interest. I'm having a show soon in Barcelona. There's all sorts of really cool shit going on. And you start being like, yeah, people are feeling me, And then, you meet someone like Darren and you're just like, damn, that's some next level shit, But really, it's all just a metaphor for what we're trying to do with this life. We're just trying to constantly build. And if you ever think you're done, well, you put that on yourself. You really shouldn't ever be done. If you really think about it. So yeah, go see the art fairs this weekend. Go see me being goofy with a microphone. You can gear up for the alternative art fair. It's the weekend following. We'll be talking about that next week. And also go see the Adam Jebsen show at Peter Lau Gallery. He's stepping it up. He's making some great work. He's he was a guest on the show earlier, but definitely go see that show if you are here in Copenhagen. And definitely, if you see me out there, come say hello. I'm the guy with the microphones. This week's episode brought to you once again by Undergang Unlimited. Big shout out to Johnny Ripper for kindly providing us with the new intro music. Great stuff. Check him out. There'll be a link to that both here and on the About page for the show. Where's all this? Undergang.net. That's our home on the web. It's where you find everything full of information, full of photos of artwork, full of all sorts of great stuff. Please go check it out. You can also follow us on Twitter, The Undergang. On Twitter, we talk about art, we show pictures, we crack bad jokes. Come holler at us. And really, what we want is for you guys to reach out. You can get a hold of us through the website, via email, on Twitter. Tell us what you think. Let us know where you're at. Do what you got to do. We'd love to hear from you. And finally, if you do like the show, tell a friend. Put it up on social media. Help us spread the word. We're growing. We're getting bigger. And of course, thanks so much for listening. We appreciate each and every one of you. All right, remember, do a good job, guys. We'll catch you next week.